This is The High Road with author and registered psychotherapist, Dr. Marlene Bizub. Dr. Marlene speaks to the heart of people who need to be lifted up and get out of the muck and mire that often accompanies major life changes, such as divorce or separation. Dr. Marlene will aspire to help parents of divorce to love their children more than they hate their ex, and to learn to take the high road. So please welcome the host of The High Road, Dr. Marlene.
Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you're watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. Welcome, George. Thanks for joining me again.
Good morning, Dr. Marlene. Always great to be with you, and I'm ready to learn.
Well, we're going to pick your brain today because what we're going to talk about to begin with, we're going to get into rules of co-parenting because there are some simple, basic, but numerous rules of co-parenting that a lot of parents don't know. So we're going to start covering those. There's no way we'll cover them all today, but we're going to put a big dent in it. But before we go there, I wanted to talk briefly about resistant teens. And like you said, are there any other kind? And that's so true. Teens are by nature, well, no, it's not by nature. It's actually by developmental stage. They are resistant, rebellious sometimes. Often it doesn't rise to the level of rebellion, but they might be resistant visiting, or I shouldn't say visiting, exercising parenting time with one of the parents. And often that's just because they feel more comfortable in one home. They feel more comfortable with one parent. They don't like going back and forth. It's just constant change. It may have to do with the kids who live in the neighborhood. They like this home better because in this neighborhood, they've got more friends, that kind of thing. But where I'm going to punt this to you, and we're going to pick your brain, is this, as well as other things that we're going to talk about today, but we'll start here. When is it time in situations such as that, or any other you want to bring up, or some that I might throw at you? When is it time to take somebody back to court, to file contempt of court? Tell us when that's good and when that's not so good.
Well, it's a difficult decision to make, and unfortunately, when the client shows up at the attorney's office and says, I'm tired of him or her always being late or always sabotaging my parenting time, I want to go back in front of the judge and change the parenting schedule. It's very difficult because a contempt citation often does more harm than good. And you may end up with a child or a teen who is saying, Mom, why did you put Dad in jail? Or Dad, why did you put Mom in jail? Because there's only a certain amount of years that you can tell them, well, Mom took a trip or Dad took a trip, and they're pretty soon going to figure it out. So oftentimes a contempt citation makes things worse because the contemnor acts out more after the contempt proceeding. And the typical remedy for contempt is jail time in the proceeding for contempt in a domestic relations case. So it's a very difficult decision. It needs to be made judiciously. It needs to be a last resort and not a first resort. But as attorneys, we may have instructions from the client. I want to go in front of the judge, period, about this. And so you're obligated to take the case in front of the judge. But oftentimes contempt behavior, it needs to be continuous or very egregious, very severe behavior. Otherwise, the judge is going to say, look, you're going to have bumps in the road. You two need to figure it out. You have a certain number of years left to co-parent. So you need to stop this and figure it out. And so the parties have spent time and money and emotion, and nothing is really improved at all. There haven't been changes to the behavior or the attitude of the contemnor. And oftentimes, a contempt citation will empower the contemnor to act out. But ultimately, I think the kids are harmed by it because the behavior between the parents typically hardens after a contempt citation proceeding. So the kids are going to suffer from that. So it's a very difficult decision. It needs to be a last resort. It needs to be in the face of egregious or continuously bad behavior. And those would be examples of when a contempt citation might be appropriate.
That is very helpful. And you've confirmed some things that I thought, but I wasn't positive about. Because as you can imagine, I have clients walk in and they'll say, I'm going to contact my attorney. She was late. I'm going to file contempt. It says you need to be there at 10 o'clock. She got there at 10:15 or 10:20. We're not talking hours late. Of course, most parents aren't going to wait for hours, and they usually aren't talking about a pattern. And so I'm glad to hear you say this is egregious stuff. It's a pattern. It's not, contempt is not to be used when somebody is late one time or something like that. They do it one time and it isn't even all that bad. But like I said, I'll get your clients, not yours, but the client that walks in and says, I'm contacting my attorney because I'm going to hold her or him in contempt. Um, I'm going to throw out another aspect of this, and I want to see if you agree or what you think. And I'm not even sure you will always see. You'll see it, but maybe not to the same extent or in a different light than I do. What I often see is a parent takes the other to court for contempt. They lose because it's petty or just, not that big a deal. And it's a one time thing or whatever. And most attorneys aren't going to take them if it's a one time thing or not that big a deal. But when it does happen and they lose, I see the other parent becoming empowered. Like they're worse than they were before. Now they're going to push the envelope every time. Do you ever see that, and do you think that's real? Because I see it.
I think it's very real. It the alleged contemnor and the one who's supposedly committing these horrible offenses uh, says, "Well, look, you took me to court and the judge didn't care. Now I'm really going to act out." And
Yeah,
so, yeah, that's not uncommon.
good. I'm glad to hear that because that's my perception, but I never know if my, perception is wrong. But it seems like that parent who avoided the contempt is, like you said, they're acting out after that. They're worse. And now it's like, I'm going to show you nothing happens. So watch this. And they get even worse. And it's like, I actually tell, and I don't know if you are okay with this, but I tell clients in my office, you can contact your attorney if you want, but I think long and hard, and I always say, talk to your attorney. But you might want to think long and hard about that because you could empower them if the court doesn't see it the same way.
Yeah, I think that's very true, and it's a risk. So a
Yeah.
contempt citation, I think it needs to be used sparingly and judiciously in a last resort.
Mhm.
Other things should be tried, contact between the attorneys, involvement of a mental health professional, perhaps a parent coordinator decision maker would alleviate some of the frictions that are occurring. So the contempt citation really should be a last resort, a last remedy. And too often it's a first resort.
Yes. Yes, parents are so quick to come in with one offense, the first offense, and we're going to file contempt. And I'm like, really? Have you talked to your attorney about that? Because most attorneys, I think, will say what you say. Um, how do you know? And I don't know that you can answer this, but give us some thoughts. How do you know when it tips the scale? Is it just how many times, how it affects the child, how it affects the other parent? Like, how do you know when it's tipping the scale?
I think it's all of the things that you mentioned. How often is the behavior occurring? How injurious is the behavior, especially to the child? What's the likelihood that the judge can formulate a remedy other than jail time? Um, how severe is the behavior? How recurring is the behavior? All those things have to be taken into consideration, because otherwise you end up with, as you've said, a contempt hearing that the accusing parent loses, and the other parent is more empowered than ever to
Mhm,
act out or misbehave.
mhm. Plus, I have never seen a co-parenting relationship enhanced in any way from contempt action. I
No,
mean,
no,
it's destructive.
it really is. It's a very threatening proceeding, especially to the parent who is accused. They're looking at jail time potentially. So it in a situation where people, I mean, I've never had a client who wasn't angry and scared, and so that is enhanced by a failed contempt proceeding. So the
Mhm.
parties might be starting to heal. They might be starting to move on with their parenting and their co-parenting, but that really just blows up everything. It really does.
Yes. Yes. I would agree. Also, something you mentioned earlier is you'll get a kid who finds out. And I have parents say, and he or she told our child. Well, I'm going to argue that point every time because I'm going to say they might have told them. Are you sure they told them? Because what I see happen more often than not is the child is there when the parent is served and the parent's caught off guard, and the child takes the document out of the parent's hand and looks at it, or the parent in a state of shock blurts something out like, he's holding me in contempt, or the parent says nothing, but the child can tell that something is going on and they snoop. And if you think your kids aren't snooping, you're wrong, because I guarantee you they're looking at your mail, your emails, your phone. I mean, they are. And parents don't always believe that. They think if the child knows, then the other parent must have told them. They had to have told them.
Well, it's unfortunate because I think at some point in time the child becomes old enough to know what's going on. I mean, they're
Yes.
aware, and I think for most of us, from my perspective, we would be surprised how young that happens, that the children become aware of what's going on.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. They don't have to be very old to pick up on this stuff at all or to snoop. And especially if they have older siblings or older friends or cousins or whoever it may be, they're going to put those ideas in their head.
Mm.
Oh, have your parents ever done such and such? Well, the kid had never thought about it before, but now they're sure going to go and look and see, you know, and that's
Sure.
just the nature of kids. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they have a natural curiosity, and again, their world is shaken when a contempt citation proceeding is in play, and so that has to be taken into consideration. as well. What's the impact on the child or children going to be of this proceeding? And it's usually a negative impact. I'm not aware of any situation where a contempt citation has made a client's child feel more secure, more happy, more certain about their family. It just doesn't happen that way. It's a very
No,
destructive remedy.
it is. It truly is. And even if the kids don't have any idea it's going on, they sense that something is different. And this is the piece that parents don't get. Is your kids pick up on the fact that something is different, even if they never find out that contempt action was filed. They just know that now when mom sees dad, her reaction is very different than it was last week, you know.
Yeah, I think so. The level of fear and anger is only raised by a contempt citation.
Right.
Uh, and for some people, unfortunately, it is a remedy. It does change their behavior. But I
Hmm.
think that's few and far between. It's just not a realistic expectation.
Right. Well, and let me ask you this too, to this point. When you said it's a remedy, do you often see, or at least sometimes see, that a parent files contempt, the other parent gets their act together, and then the parent who filed the contempt drops it? Have you seen that, that it's effective without ever having to go to court?
I have not. By the time a client prevails upon me to file a contempt citation, they're kind of hell bent for election that they're going to go through with it. So
Yeah.
I have not seen that happen, but I'm sure it does happen in certain cases. I just haven't been lucky enough to have them be my cases.
Right, right. And I think that would be, I don't want to call it ideal because ideal would be if we didn't have to file this at all. But if you are filing contempt, I think an ideal outcome would be for the parent to get their act together and the other parent to say, okay, it has served its purpose. Let's withdraw the motion.
That is an option. You have to be careful withdrawing motions. Both of the attorneys need to be in agreement typically on that. Or
Mhm.
the judge is saying, why are you filing things and then not going through with them in my court? Um,
Okay.
so it does happen. Again, I haven't been lucky enough when my client prevails upon me to file a contempt. They're typically they're going to go through with the hearing.
Okay. And I'm guessing a good attorney doesn't file it unless there's really a warranted reason.
Yeah, typically we're going to assess what the client tells us and try and filter out the noise and look at the behavior that's complained of. Again, the severity of the behavior, the frequency of the behavior, and there needs to be the presence of egregious behavior or continuous behavior before a contempt citation is even justifiable.
Yes, yes. And then you mentioned that usually it involves jail time. Is that the typical remedy, I guess you would say, or are there fines? Or because isn't there punitive and remedial? And I'm not sure that, and actually, I think before we delve into this, because I'm guessing this answer is going to be longer than the time we have, maybe we'll table it for a couple of minutes. But when we come back, let's talk about the difference between, and I know enough to be dangerous here, remedial and punitive contempt. Okay?
All right.
We will think about that. Well, you can think about it, and then I'm going to pick your brain when you come back because I know we all want to hear what the difference is when you use or ask for one as opposed to the other, that type of thing. Again, not being an attorney, I don't know how that stuff works, but I think our parents and me need to know.
Very good.
Okay. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you're watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. We'll be right back.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness: Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals.
Welcome back. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you're watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. Before we went to break, we were talking about contempt, and I put you on the spot, George, but I gave you a couple of minutes to formulate your answer. Not that you need to, because I know you know very well what the answer is, but I don't. Explain remedial and punitive contempt.
Well, let me start with punitive. That's the easiest to explain. You're just asking the court to punish the other party for their behavior. And that form of punishment could be a fine. It could be, it's typically going to be some jail time. And it's not a lot of jail time. The first contempt, if there are multiple contempts, it gets worse. The punishment gets worse. But at first, a lot of people, they have never been involved in the criminal system. So to go to jail for a couple days is very scary for most people. It's a very scary experience. And so the court is typically very sparing in handing out sentences. It might be a weekend or a couple of weekends or something like that at the first contempt citation. And it typically does have the effect of punishment. I mean, and for a lot of people, if they're not used to being in the system or haven't been in touch with the criminal system for whatever reason, it can have the effect of causing somebody to amend their behavior. It does happen, but as often as not, I think it aggravates the behavior, or some other behavior takes the place of that one. So punitive contempt is just what it sounds like. I want you to punish this person for their behavior. Remedial contempt is, Judge, can you enter an order or formulate an order which fixes what's going on? And so the judge would formulate an order that has what it sounds like remedy in it. It fixes what's wrong. And it doesn't involve punishment, attorney's fees being assessed, and things of that nature.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. I mean, the words alone imply, punitive is punishment and remedial is a remedy. That makes sense. Speaking of attorney's fees, and I'm just going to go down a garden path here for a minute, but how often, because I don't see it a lot, and I think people ought to know this, how often are attorneys' fees awarded?
I think attorney's fees are awarded sparingly because
Yeah.
it is the ultimate insult to
Yes.
the party against whom they're awarded. So they have their own attorney's fees to deal with. Now they have additional fees that are in the nature of a fine or a punishment. Um, and they're awarded, I would say, infrequently. Now, if you have a case where there is a huge disparity in the economic status of the
Hmm.
parties, you're more likely to see an award of attorney's fees or partial attorney's fees. But other than that, if the parties are on relatively equal footing economically, it's a very sparing remedy, I think.
Okay. Okay. And that was my sense. I don't see them get awarded very often. Um, People seem to ask for them quite a bit, but I don't see them get awarded very often. So that's helpful to know. Um, yeah. Okay, let's get into some rules of co-parenting. And we may jump back to contempt and talk more about it with some of these rules. But to at least start, the rule, and this probably would not be a contemptible thing, but it could be. The rule that comes to mind first, always with me, because it's in three separate handouts of the level 2 co parenting class that I teach for the courts. And it's what I call the golden rule of co parenting is we don't communicate through the children, period. And I don't know what your thought is about that as far as if you see the effect on your client of the parents communicating through the children. And I'm sure you tell your client not to if they are. And like I said, I don't know that this is one that ends up, the issue subject of a contempt action very often, but it's very destructive, I think. What's your thought about communicating through the children?
Well, if it's a matter of substance, if it's an issue of substance, then it's wholly inappropriate. You're parentifying the child. You're giving the child information that they really don't know what to do with. If it's something simple like my games at 2 o'clock on Saturday, something like that, I don't think is harmful or creates friction. But if it's a matter of substance like what school am I going to go to next year, or um, do I participate in this extracurricular activity? Who pays for it? How is that going to happen? Things of that nature. Then it's wholly inappropriate to communicate through the child because it puts the child in a position that they don't have skills to deal with. And
Right.
how and then do they go back and forth, back and forth? Is this child going back and forth as a messenger? It turns into a mess. It's really inappropriate because it hangs the child out to dry. They don't know what is going on, how to handle the dynamic between mom and dad. So it's really unfair to the child, I think.
Oh, I totally agree. And often, to your point, often the way I see it play out, because it'll sometimes happen in my office instead of at home, I think because children feel safe there and, you know, they say some of these things there rather than at home. But it will often come out in the way of a child saying to a parent, Mom says it's because of you that I can't play football.
Mhm.
And that's where it's like, okay, let's stop. Let's let mom and dad talk about whether or not you're going to play football. But that's often the way it comes out is accusatory, angry, because one parent has told the other, whether it's accurate or not, that they can't play because the other parent won't agree. And kids don't know, like you said, they don't have the skills to know to say, is it true that you don't want me to play football? And is it because it's so expensive that you just don't feel you can pay for it? Or does it have something to do, and see, they'll never think of things like this. Does it have something to do with how far away from your home or your work my practices are? They don't know to ask those kind of things. None of that even enters their minds. They just know they don't get to play and they're mad. And so it comes across very accusatory.
Well, it's not only accusatory, it causes the child to sometimes have anger toward the parents.
Yes.
And so the child needs to have an explanation that's appropriate, age appropriate. Uh, Different children mature at different rates. So I say age
Mhm.
appropriate, but age appropriate for that particular child.
Yes. Maturity level appropriate.
Right, right.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. No, I very much agree. And, then sometimes it's very blatant, and you get a kid who says, Mom told me to tell you this, and
Mhm.
it's very obvious that it's blatant. Now, to me, if ever there was a contemptible um, issue in this respect, it would be when kids are doing that, when is something really hateful and nasty, and we've got the kids saying it, being the mouthpiece for the other parent. That's when I think it really rises to the level of being inappropriate.
Well, and I think oftentimes a PCDM has the ability to head off those types of behaviors.
Yes. Yes. Clearly we do. Because in fact, well, I say that because just this morning I was writing an email, and two kids, and they are both teenagers. One barely a teenager. He actually might still be 12. But anyway, they're older kids. They're not little kids. But they had heard from me that the parents should not communicate between them. And then one parent did. And so the other parent, kind of called the other parent, the parent who communicated through them, out on that and said, Hey, the kids said, Miss Marlene said we shouldn't communicate through them, but that you told them this. And so I wrote an email just this morning about that and said, That's right. They heard that from me. And I told them because I want to take them out of the middle. And I work with them too on what to say because I don't let them be rude or disrespectful. But I do tell them they may politely say to their parent, I don't think you're supposed to communicate through me. Not, I'm not going to be your messenger. You tell him yourself. I don't put up with that. But they can certainly say, Miss Marlene said, we're really not supposed to be the messengers, that you two are supposed to communicate between yourselves. That's perfectly acceptable to me. But as I said, I wrote an email about it just this morning between the two parents. You know what's funny about that, George, is the kids will get it even when the parents don't.
Well, I wonder if, and I would certainly defer to your knowledge on this because I have no way of knowing, but I wonder if when they get to be older teens, they wouldn't say, Mom or Dad, I'm really uncomfortable with your asking me to do that.
Yes, yes. Yeah. And I encourage them to say that, especially if they say it like that. If they're very appropriate, but just say, I'm uncomfortable with that. Absolutely. I try my best to empower kids because, quite frankly, the parents don't always know and they don't always think about it. When I tell them, you really shouldn't have asked your kid to tell his mom that or his dad that, the parent will go, Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. I didn't even think about that. It often is not hostile. They're not sending a hostile message. Just forget that they really shouldn't be doing that. But it does make kids uncomfortable.
I think it
truly.
does, and I wonder how the parent responds when a child says, or a teen says, I'm really uncomfortable with that, mom or dad, or carrying your information back and forth, however they would say that. How does the parent respond who hears that?
And I don't often know because it's happening in the home or in the car, but not in my office. But most parents, at least in front of me, will react just the way I said a minute ago that, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't even think about that. You're right. But who knows what they're saying at home?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Which is a message to parents out there. Um, what you are saying to your children at home is eventually going to end up either back in my office or it's going to be shared with a teacher or a counselor or someone at school or something like that. And so we have to watch what we say because I have kids who come back and tell me, well, I told my dad I wasn't comfortable with that, but he said, well, I'm not comfortable communicating with your mother either. You can see why I don't like to talk to her either. Well, that's inappropriate. But parents sometimes don't act the best and the way they should in the middle of a divorce.
No, certainly. I yesterday I had the pleasant experience of being at the dentist, and
Oh,
I was talking to one of the hygienists about the show and
mhm.
what we talk about and what we try to accomplish. And she was very impressed and very appreciative. She said, "Thank you for what you do," and so
Oh,
I think most people are receptive to constructive, not even criticism, just constructive suggestions on how to co-parent without creating friction between the parents, and that's so
yes.
cool.
Yes. It's amazing how many parents are receptive to my direction. And they thank me for it. You get a few who get defensive because they don't want anyone having to tell them how to act. They know how to act. Well, they really don't. There's nothing wrong with that. And I tell them that early on. There's nothing wrong with not knowing the rules of co-parenting. No one teaches us this. And unless you're ordered to take a level two co-parenting class or any co-parenting class, but especially when you get into the longer classes like the level two, which can run up to 8 hours, you're learning a lot of information. And how would anyone expect someone to know that stuff? And yet you also get parents who resist coming. Some want to be there and they're happy to know what the rules are, but some resent the fact that they've got to go and have to hear this stuff. Well, you don't know it, and it will help you to know it.
I think it would help tremendously, and it's an experience that most people haven't ever been through before. So
Exactly.
it's a complex dynamic. It's a new dynamic that people have not experienced typically
Mhm.
um, before. And so the kids don't come with an owner's manual, and you don't get handed an owner's manual when you get your divorce decree, or if you have a custody decree, parenting time, or parenting responsibility case. So it most people, I think, are amenable to following some rules that they perceive to be helpful to themselves. And so
Yes.
you say, if you want to do well for your child, here's a way to do it.
Yes. And the rub I sometimes get, and I have to tell the parents I work with too, that I don't always agree with all the rules, but they are what they are. And often, if I tell them that, they're more accepting of rules that they don't agree with because that becomes the rub is I don't agree with this. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry, but it's what we have to follow. So I find that it often helps if I tell them I don't always agree either, but this is what they are and we have to follow them.
Mhm.
Yeah. All right, it's hard to believe it's time for another quick break. This time flies by, at least for us. But this is Dr. Marlene and George, and you're watching The High Road on Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. We'll be right back.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like it was almost instant, like I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. You know, it feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Welcome back. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you're watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. Just to cover at least one more rule of co-parenting, let's talk about parents talking to the other parent before they tell a kid that they might be able to do something with that parent. And when this usually occurs is when it's one parent's parenting time, but the kids want to do something with the other parent. And a common mistake parents make is to say to their children, well, let me ask your dad if it's okay with him, you can go with me. And you don't ever say that, and people think, what's wrong with that? At least you're saying you're going to ask. Or sometimes they don't even say, let me ask. They'll just say, if it's okay with your dad, you can go with me. The harm in that is it's that parents, in this case, will say, dad, it's dad's parenting time. What if dad says no? Now you've made dad the bad guy because they want to go and you've like enticed them to want to go. And then you say, well, let me ask him, or you just throw out there that if it's okay with him, they can. And like I said, that makes dad the bad guy. I'll let you take it from there, but give me your thoughts on that.
Well, I wonder, I'm familiar with your story about your son and going skiing with his dad on your
Yes.
parenting time. And so
Yes.
my assumption is that you talked to his dad just between the two parents. And
Absolutely.
it's probably more effective, it's more efficient. It doesn't vilify or have the potential to vilify one parent or the other. So I think it's, again, you don't want to put the child in the middle. And
Right.
this is all really flows from loving your child more than you hate your ex. And
It does.
when I had this conversation yesterday, I said, that's not easy. We understand that.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. It's a very difficult time. It's a lot to ask of someone, but think of what's involved. Your child and your child's development, your child's sense of self. So it's worth it. And when I put it that way, most people shake their heads. Yes, I think so. I can
Mhm.
see. I'm sorry those principles weren't around when I was getting my divorce. I hear all kinds of messages like that when I talk about the show to people. And it's really a driving concept that if people would stop and think of that, uh, they might avoid some, not all, but they might avoid some of the faux pas of violating co-parenting rules, if you will.
Yes, yes. And for those who don't know what you're talking about, I'll just give a brief description. But my ex-husband took my son skiing every Thanksgiving. And he absolutely asked me first, because had he not, and he would have asked my son, well, which do you think my son wants to do? Go skiing with his dad or watch me cook a turkey? You know, and so, of course, he wants to go with his dad. But thank God his dad, my ex husband, God love him, he had a birthday a couple days ago, and I wished him a happy birthday. And I am so grateful and thankful that I had the co parent that I had or have. I always will still have him as my co parent. But yeah, he talked to me first. And that made all the difference in the world. I might have been less inclined to say yes every time if he had told my son, and then my son's mad at me because he wants to go skiing and I'm saying no. Yeah.
Yeah, it has real potential to vilify one of the parents,
Well, it
and
does.
that
Yeah,
in and of itself is very inappropriate.
it is. And sometimes I think, and I hate to say this, but you'll know it's true. I think that's the parent's intent who entices the child. Their intent is to vilify the other one. I know they're going to say no, and then the child will get mad at them. And that's their goal. And that's wrong. That is just wrong. Sometimes it happens innocently enough that a parent will just throw out there, hey, if it's okay with your other parent, you can go, but it's their time. But I tell parents, don't even say that. Just say, hey, I'm sorry you can't go too, but you're going to be with dad or mom, and you're going to enjoy the time you spend, and we'll go another time. Then on your own, ask the other parent. And then you can always go back to the child and say, you know how you said you wanted to go skiing with me? Well, if you still do, if you really meant it, and if you still do, because they might have changed their mind. They might have gotten an invitation to a birthday party in the meantime, and they don't want to go with you. So it's important to give them an out and say, if you really meant it, and if you still want to go, I asked your mom or your dad, and they said, it's fine. We're going to trade weekends. Now, would you like for us to do that? And then again, let them back out if they don't want to. But at least talking to the other parent first is most appropriate. And I think some parents just plain don't want to talk to the other parent. Like their intent is not to create conflict between the child and the other parent. They simply don't have any desire to communicate with the other parent. And let me tell you something, your kids pick up on that too. And I know you can speak to that, to parents who come in and tell you that the kid picked up on how they are acting or how the other parent is acting without them sharing anything with them.
And that's a good example of somebody who might come in and say, "Gee, I want to file a contempt citation because my ex is communicating through our child." And that's just something that a judge is typically not going to react to. Um, it's a little cynical, but it's almost like saying if you want to upset your child by your behavior, then I'm not going to stop you.
Right.
But that's a good example of behavior that would really need to be severe or recurrent to warrant a contempt citation being filed. But it's really
Yes.
unfair to the child, regardless of the legal workings of the contempt process or the court process. So again, if parents let their kids out of the middle If they just keep that in mind, that would be very helpful, I'm imagining.
Yes. Yes. And like you said earlier, just love your child more than you hate your ex, for those who are doing it vindictively. And for those who aren't, we go back to you've got to know the rules of co parenting, and we understand that you don't. But get over the insult that you feel, or that some parents seem to feel, when someone suggests that you should take a class. There's nothing wrong with that, but you get people who resist and they are insulted that you're implying that they should need more education. But you don't have it. Nobody gets married preparing to or planning on getting divorced. Therefore, you have no idea what the rules of co parenting are.
No, and it's a complex process and it's not easy. And I think we understand that it's difficult for people. But it's worth it because it's your
Yeah.
child that we're talking about.
Yes, yes. It is. And the more that even here we can talk about the rules of co parenting so people know what they are, I think that's really important. And always you're going to want to check out what the rules are in your jurisdiction if you aren't sure. Ask your attorney, ask other parents, although that can be dangerous, but they might be different from jurisdiction to jurisdiction or
Well, and
state to state. But yeah, go ahead.
strongly consider having a PCDM on the case.
Yes, yes, that's the best remedy, I think, for sure. And thank you for saying that. Well, it's hard to believe we're at the end of our time, but thank you again, George, for doing this with me.
My pleasure. It's always a privilege to be with you, Dr. Marlene.
Thank you. And this is Dr. Marlene and George, and you've been watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. We'll see you next week.
Tune in to The High Road with host Dr. Marlene and gain insight into how to rise above tough circumstances and learn the skills that will help you take the high road in your life, no matter what challenges might come your way, on the next episode of The High Road.